China warns the West about Africa. Let's get into it. China warns West on Africa. Beijing insists the continent should be a stage, meaning Africa, for international cooperation, not great power rivalry. I think Beijing is concerned about Africa being a stage for a proxy war between China and the West. Promoting Beijing's investment in African development and modernization during his first foreign trip, China's new foreign minister, Qin Gang, said on Wednesday that the continent should not become a battleground for rival world powers. Yeah, that's what they're concerned about. About Africa being a staging ground for a proxy war. Qin began a 5-country tour in Ethiopia on Wednesday, opening the new headquarters of the African Center for Disease Control, CDC, built by Chinese engineers. While in Addis Ababa, he met with Ethiopian leadership and visited the African Union headquarters. He is scheduled to visit Egypt, Angola, Benin, and Gabon before returning to China. Africa should be a big stage for international cooperation, not an arena for competition between major powers or major countries, Qin said at a press conference with AU African Union Commission Chair Moussa Faki. A former Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Qin became foreign minister last month. He continued the tradition, making Africa the first foreign destination of his tenure, which he noted has continued for 33 years without interruption. Speaking at the opening of the Africa CDC, he outlined Beijing. See, China's building all of this stuff for Africa. And that's why Africa has the kind of relationship that it does with China. The West does nothing but destroy while China builds in the continent. Speaking at the opening of the Africa CDC, he outlined Beijing's vision for relations with Africa, saying the two will always have a shared future, quote, no matter how the international environment changes. Today, our world, our times, and history are changing in ways like never before. The collective rise of developing countries is irreversible, Qin said, adding that China and Africa should oppose hegemony, the U.S., bullying, the U.S. and the West, high-handedness and racial discrimination, also the West, and jointly safeguard true multilateralism and promote greater democracy in international relations. Qin insisted that Beijing's policy was based on the principles of sincerity, real results, amity, and good faith, and of pursuing the greater good and shared interests. China makes no empty promises, still less presses others against their own will, he said in a speech at the Africa CDC when it handed over to our African friends. The Africa CDC headquarters will be wholly run and managed by the AU, African Union, without any interference from China. And that's, you heard what he said, without any interference from China. That's another positive aspect about China. They don't interfere and meddle in people's affairs while the West does. The West is notorious, and especially America is notorious for this. Just look at the Russia and Ukraine example. The U.S. and its European allies, many of whom used to be colonial powers in Africa, have long accused China of practicing debt trap diplomacy. As if they're concerned. Fuck off. They're only concerned about that because Africa has the wealth and resources, and they don't want China to have a kind of imprint or footprint in Africa. You people didn't care about Africa before China got there. After the meeting with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Qin announced that China would be writing off a portion of Addis Ababa's debt. Last year, Beijing forgave 23 loans to 17 African countries. Ethiopia has borrowed almost $14 billion from China since 2000 and has sought relief since 2021, citing the devastation caused by the conflict in Tigray. So, China doesn't want Africa to be a platform for war. Just like, look at Ukraine. Ukraine is a staging ground, a platform for the West's proxy war against Russia. And so China doesn't want any of that kind of stuff because it cannot compete militarily, financially, etc., against, unfortunately, the West. And the West, they come together and they share resources, and they have a lot of the resources. They have a lot of military, naval ships. They have a lot of aircraft carriers. They have a lot of, air fighter jets and all of that kind of stuff, missiles, all of that kind of stuff. And so China is using more peaceful methods, more soft power as opposed to hard power to try to get what it wants from Africa. And while the West uses military bullying and uses coercion through its military to get what it wants from around the world, including from Africa. And so China doesn't want a war in Africa. It just wants to continue to do business with Africa and have good relations with a lot of these countries. But let me know what you guys think. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this on the podcast, tweet me. Let me know what you think there. Take care.